Hey guys, welcome back to another Gaming Memories video. Here we are actually taking a look at a classic FPS game by the name of Alien Trilogy. A lot of you may be familiar with this game. This was actually a very high selling game on the PlayStation back in the day. It was released back in 1996, but it also was released on the Sega Saturn and also on Windows PC. The game was developed by Probe Entertainment and then published by Acclaim Entertainment. While the PC version actually got access to a multiplayer add-on to the game, the console versions didn't actually have that. It only had the single player campaign. The Alien Trilogy game itself, it takes kind of elements from the original 3 films from the actual franchise and takes a lot of like the aesthetics and even like the characteristics in terms of even the enemies and so forth from those 3 films and put them into the game. The game itself consists of about 30 levels with 3 massive boss levels in conjunction with the campaign. So you do take control of the main character literally from the franchise that was portrayed by Sigourney Weaver in the movies, and they kind of use as kind of like a plot based off the original films but tries to add its own context into it. The game itself also started development early in 1994, and Alien Trilogy was also one of the first games to ever use the likes of 3D motion capture technology for the likes of the characters, like the aliens themselves, for the enemies. The reason being is because they wanted to give all the enemy characters their own authentic movements and to make them kind of like unpredictable, so they can kind of add to the element of the game. Primarily this game actually resembles the likes of Doom at the time, because Doom was considered to be the all-time god of FPS games at that current time. So there was a lot of other games that were trying to literally take its mantle, if you will. Alien Trilogy, in fairness, actually came quite close to that because it was very, very popular. It was actually a high-selling game. It was one of the best-selling games in the UK in 1996. The game itself now, it actually got really good reviews in magazines, but the one thing that it was kind of slated on to some degree was the fact is that even with the level design, some of the graphics were very, very similar throughout the course of the game. It had the same kind of textures and stuff, so you kind of felt like you were running around the same areas over and over again, and it just felt that could feel like, for some players, to feel like it could get a little bit repetitive after a while. But in saying that, even with that issue, the game also was one of the best looking, visually, aesthetically beautiful games on the PlayStation at that time. And for an FPS game, it really was a step up in terms of the graphical quality of those type of games. And the fact is, it also used horror elements very similar to the likes of Doom. It was very, very dark, eerie. You didn't really know what was around the next corner. That was what was really cool about it. You kind of never really knew what was going to happen or where enemies were going to pop out from. You could literally walk around the corner and then literally the aliens will come at you from out of the shadows or behind like crates and so forth. So it definitely kept you on your toes. It really actually is, even though it's very action orientated, it is actually a very, very creepy and scary game in its own right. The game itself also gives access to a large array of weapons throughout the course of the game that you will actually be able to use, some stronger than others. But the highlight pretty much of the game, which is the same pretty much in any FPS game, is always the shotgun. And in Alien Trilogy, it's no different. The shotgun is definitely my weapon of choice, and I think it's everyone else's weapon of choice. As you can see here on the screen, you go around the corner and you never know where enemies are going to pop out from, so at least you turn your back and you can turn around again. An alien will literally be standing there waiting to just swipe at you and just scare the living hell out of you. But the trusty old shotgun makes quick work of them. But even the sound of the shotgun, like with Doom before it, that was one of the best features of the game. Just the sound of the shotgun was just, it was incredible, and it really kind of set the tone that you knew that you were literally going to kick butt with literally once you got your hands on that weapon. And this game is no different. Shotgun is just awesome in the game, so it is. But as you can see here, like the graphics in terms, the corridors, you do walk around very similar type of corridors in the levels. That's the one thing I would say, going back to that one of the main issues that was in the game. A lot of the aesthetics are very, very similar throughout the levels, but once you find your way around, you'll actually get through the levels fairly quickly. But there's times now you may not find enemies at all, and then you go into a room and then you're completely bombarded by loads of enemies. So it actually does scare the hell out of you. But the game is actually so much fun, and it definitely is a challenge, and especially if you're into that creepy, eerie feel, you'll definitely have your money's worth here. It definitely is considered to be one of the best games, especially the earlier type of games on the PlayStation, and it's also highly regarded in the likes of the first person shooter genre, but also the survival horror genre, because it does a really good job of mixing both elements, and it really does capture the initial vibe of the movies as well, that also had that similar kind of survival horror kind of effect too. My first experience with the game, when I first played it, it was actually around at one of my friend's house. He had actually rented it out one weekend, because there was some weekends you used to go around and you'd stay in his house at the weekend, and he had the PlayStation long before, like, say, I did, and he had rented it out one weekend, and at that time we were kind of always kind of like mad into Resident Evil. But I remember one night he called round to the house and he's like, Peter, you have to actually play this game. This game's actually awesome. Now at the time I kind of couldn't really grasp what was going on. I'd never really played like a first person shooter before. This was actually one of the first ones that I'd actually ever played. And I'll be honest, actually, because like Doom as well, I also found that I kind of suffered a little bit of motion sickness. I think FPS games back in those days, if you weren't used to them, that's what used to happen, and I definitely felt that. I actually thought it was really cool, but I really thought it was very eerie. It definitely had a different vibe to it. After a while I actually kind of just stopped playing it, because like, this game's actually getting under my skin a little bit too much. I think it was because it was very dark. You never really knew what was going on. Even with Resident Evil, as scary and all as it is, the corridors were always kind of dimly lit, but they were enough that you could see what was going on. This here, you didn't know what was going on until literally something was literally scrabbing at your face, or literally like a face hugger would actually jump on your face and you're literally just crapping yourself trying to get it off you, and you didn't know what to be doing. So it definitely got under your skin. It definitely got that element right of it. But I do remember actually playing it, and even though it was tough, I did enjoy it, but I didn't really know kind of what to do. I think you were kind of not really sure of the fact is that there is a story based element, because it was also one of the first FPS games to also include kind of like a story kind of style to it as well, that it wasn't just all get from one end to the level to the next. It was actually a genuine story, and you had to complete objectives in order to move forward. You couldn't complete the level until you did it. But as you can see here, even though the level is dimly lit, there's enemies everywhere, and you never know where they're going to come up from. They're always just going to just appear at random. But that's what makes the game so cool, and the fact is that for an early like type of game like this, they were able to capture those elements. It was really put together very well, and it definitely still holds its own today. Like, even for an early PlayStation 1 title, it was considered one of the better looking titles on the console at that time. And as you can see it, and I think a lot of it has to do with the likes of those graphics, because they're very similar, because the frame rate actually runs very smoothly. There's if to no issue of lag or anything in the game, and it looks very smooth throughout. So it does, even with the dimly lit corridors and likes of everything that's going on around in the levels. But it is actually a fun title, even if it does kind of scare you. And the funny thing is, even playing it now years later, it still has that feel about it. It still actually has that vibe that it can get under your skin, and it can actually just give you a lot of jump scares, and it can literally just scare the hell out of you at any moment. But that, I suppose, that just reflects of how good the game actually is. If a game is built well and it looks as good as this does, it definitely holds its own, and that's exactly the way it is. It's definitely considered to be one of the best FPS games. Even the Saturn version itself was also highly regarded, and even considered to be graphically almost as good, if not better, than the PlayStation version. So it generally, across the board, it just is a good game regardless of the format it was actually on. It was highly praised the whole time. It was considered definitely to be one of the best FPS games of the 90s period, and definitely one of the best console shooters of all time. And it is still considered to be one of the best FPS games on the PlayStation 1 console. Again, you had loads of different kind of enemy types, that all with their own kind of unique kind of attack abilities and so forth. Even sound effects that they actually had taken from the movies to add to even more of the atmosphere, so that's what made it even more creepier. this is actually a cool title, and if you haven't played Alien Trilogy, you have to play it. Especially even if you're a fan of the movies and the franchise, it's definitely a game to actually look into. So I'd love to know your thoughts on this fantastic game. Have you played it? And if so, what are your thoughts of it? What are your memories of this game? Be sure to share them down in the comments below. So if you actually have gotten to the end of this video and you have enjoyed it, be sure to leave a like on the video, and also make sure to subscribe to the channel and hit that bell to be updated of future videos, as I will be creating a lot more videos like this here, where I'll be re-exploring a lot of these old cool quirky style games and sharing my thoughts and experiences with everyone. So as always, make sure to keep playing those classic games and enjoying them, and keep those gaming memories alive.